Her name is Linda Adewale, a woman whose ambition shines brighter than the golden sun that crowns the mornings of Lagos. But ambition has a cost. And the price she is about to pay will lead her down a path where betrayal lurks behind polished smiles, and power is a weapon more potent than any spear. Watch as it begins. But where it ends is a mystery. All on its own. Linda Adewale had always been a woman of fierce determination. From her childhood days in Ibadan, where the scent of Omla and Udu mingled with the sounds of Yoruba folktales recited by her grandmother, she had grown up knowing the weight of legacy. Her parents had instilled in her a burning desire for excellence, emphasizing education as the bridge between dreams and reality. When she was accepted into the prestigious University of Lagos, her family celebrated as if the entire village had triumphed. Years later, Linda had carved a name for herself in Lagos's bustling corporate world. She wore her success like a well-tailored Ankara dress, with grace and undeniable boldness. Now, at 32, Linda was a senior executive at Empirical Holdings, one of Africa's most influential investment firms. The company's headquarters sat like a modern palace in Victoria Island, its glass facade glinting in the sun as though daring anyone to challenge its dominance. The office culture was a blend of sophistication and subtle hostility. While Linda's colleagues greeted her with polished smiles, there was always a lacking sense of competition. They acknowledged her brilliance but not without a tinge of envy. After all, she was one of the few women, and fewer still, African women, to ascend to such a prestigious role. But the higher Linda climbed, the sharper the blades of envy became. Her competence was undeniable, her presentations were seamless, her analysis razor-sharp. Yet, her ambition was like a beacon in the night, drawing both admiration and ire. The beginning of her downfall was not a dramatic event. It started with subtle shifts, important meetings she was no longer invited to, conversations that ended abruptly when she entered the room, projects reassigned without her knowledge. Linda's discomfort grew, but her resolve hardened. Whatever was happening, she would face it head-on. Her immediate supervisor, Mr. Okafor, a man with decades of experience and a smile as warm as the Sahara at noon, had once been her biggest supporter. But even he had grown distant, his eyes evasive, his words curt. It didn't take long for Linda to realize that her presence was now considered a threat. One Thursday morning, Linda walked into the boardroom for the weekly progress meeting. The air conditioning was too cold, the room too sterile. She greeted her colleagues, her voice steady, her gaze firm. But the reception was frosty. Mr. Okafor's glance barely acknowledged her. As the meeting progressed, it became evident that the project she had spent weeks perfecting had been reassigned to Philip, a man whose charm was his greatest asset and whose work ethic was as flimsy as his smile. Mr. Okafor, I thought I was leading the Greenfields project. Linda asked, her voice calm but her eyes burning with questions. There's been a restructuring. We felt Philip's skill set was better suited for this particular initiative, Mr. Okafor replied, his gaze still fixed on the file before him. Better suited. Linda echoed, her frustration barely masked. Your talents are appreciated, Linda. But we must all play to our strengths, he said with a dismissive finality. The meeting continued without her input. Linda felt the sting of humiliation settle deep within her chest. But more than that, she felt rage. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, calculating rage that forces one to rethink strategies, to prepare for war. As the days turned into weeks, Linda's isolation grew. Tasks were siphoned away from her desk before she even had a chance to address them. Philip, now the golden child of Empirical Holdings, strutted around the office with a cockiness that bordered on disrespect. But Linda was not one to crumble under pressure. She spent her nights poring over files, digging deeper into projects that were no longer hers, compiling reports that nobody asked for. She refused to be silenced. By the end of the first month, she knew one thing for sure: if the corporate world wanted a battle, she was prepared to fight. And she was going to fight like an African woman who knew her worth. Linda Adewale's strategy was simple: observe, learn, and counterattack. What she lacked in allies within the company, she compensated for with sheer persistence. The more her colleagues tried to undermine her, the sharper her focus became. The pain of being pushed aside only fueled her ambition. Empirical Holdings prided itself on being a meritocratic environment where performance spoke louder than politics. Yet, Linda was learning that this ethos was more of a facade than a reality. She had noticed how Philip's errors were quietly corrected by subordinates too afraid to upset the new golden boy. His charm bought him forgiveness, but Linda's competence only earned her suspicion. Undeterred, Linda poured her energy into mastering every detail of the Greenfield project, the very initiative Mr. Okafor had reassigned to Philip. It was a complex investment plan aimed at developing renewable energy infrastructure across West Africa. What had been her brainchild was now being presented as Philip's magnum opus. The late-night hours Linda spent hunched over her laptop, her eyes aching from the glow of spreadsheets and feasibility reports, were not in vain. She discovered a pattern of negligence on Philip's part, oversights that could cost the company millions if not corrected. But exposing him was not her goal, at least not yet. She needed something more substantial. Her weekends were no longer her own. She found herself retreating to a small, tranquil library in Suraleh, far from the sterile coldness of Empirical Holdings' corporate offices. The library was a relic from colonial times, its wooden shelves filled with both classics and forgotten treasures. The scent of aging paper and the muted whispers of fellow patrons offered her a peace she couldn't find elsewhere. It was during one of these weekend research marathons that Linda stumbled upon the key to her counteroffensive. Hidden within the intricacies of the Greenfield project's financial model was a discrepancy, a miscalculation that could derail the entire project if not addressed. Philip had been too careless, too eager to impress, and in his haste, he had overlooked a critical flaw. Linda could have reported her findings immediately. She could have marched into Mr. Okafor's office, armed with evidence of Philip's incompetence. But she chose patience over recklessness. There was something more valuable than the satisfaction of proving Philip wrong. She wanted to reclaim her position, to demonstrate her value in a way that could not be ignored. Instead of exposing the error, Linda decided to perfect the project herself. She rewrote the financial models, adjusted projections, and created a risk management framework that addressed the oversight. Then she built a presentation, detailed, visually captivating, and foolproof. Her obsession with the project did not go unnoticed. Some colleagues whispered about her supposed desperation, while others admired her resilience from afar. Linda did not care about opinions, she cared about results. The day of the presentation arrived, and the boardroom was filled with the usual suspects, senior executives with stiff collars and sterile smiles. Mr. Okafor sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Philip, on the other hand, looked relaxed, confident in his presumed brilliance. As the meeting began, Philip launched into his presentation, his voice smooth and his gestures well rehearsed. Linda watched with a stoic expression, knowing that his projections were flawed, his conclusions unreliable. She waited for him to finish, her hands folded calmly on the polished mahogany table. When Philip concluded, Mr. Okafor's gaze swept across the room. "Any thoughts?" he asked, his voice thick with authority. Linda seized the moment. "Actually, if I may," she said, her voice steady. "I've been reviewing the Greenfield project in my own time, and I noticed some areas of concern. I've prepared a detailed analysis that I believe addresses the potential pitfalls and offers more sustainable projections." Mr. Okafor raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Go on," he said, gesturing for her to proceed. Linda connected her laptop to the projector, her presentation illuminating the screen with a clarity Phillips had lacked. She spoke with precision, her voice unwavering as she walked the boardroom through her revisions. She emphasized the financial discrepancies, not as an attack on Philip, but as areas that needed improvement. Her proposed solutions were innovative and meticulously researched. The room was silent by the time she finished. Mr. Okafor's expression was unreadable, but his nod of approval was enough. "Well done, Linda," he said, his voice surprisingly warm. "We'll need to discuss this further." Philip's face was a mask of barely contained resentment. But Linda was not concerned with his emotions. She had made her point, and she had done so on her own terms. Leaving the boardroom that day, Linda felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle was far from over, but she had proven to herself that she was not defeated. And that was all the motivation she needed to continue her silent war. Linda's victory in the boardroom had not gone unnoticed. While Mr. Okafor's approval was a monumental step toward reclaiming her reputation, the success had also drawn the attention of those who thrived on corporate warfare. Where she had once been seen as an easy target, her colleagues now regarded her with a wary respect that bordered on resentment. The days that followed her presentation were filled with whispered conversations that died down whenever she entered the room. Philip, however, was not one to accept defeat so easily. He had allies within Empirical Holdings, executives who had their own reasons for wanting Linda to fail. Philip's charm was his weapon, and he wielded it skillfully. Where Linda relied on strategy and hard work, Philip relied on influence. The same colleagues who once praised her determination now looked at her with suspicion, their loyalty swayed by Philip's subtle manipulations. He was already spinning the narrative, framing Linda's thoroughness as obsessive, her attention to detail as evidence of insecurity. But Linda was prepared. She had known from the start that proving herself once would not be enough. If she wanted to survive and thrive at Empirical Holdings, she needed to anticipate every move against her. The company was a battlefield, and she had no intention of being anyone's casualty. The Greenfields project became her shield and her sword. Despite the accolades her revision received, Mr. Okafor had made it clear that the project was far from complete. "I want you to work with Philip on this," he had said, his tone firm. "Whatever personal differences you have, leave them at the door. This project is bigger than both of you." Working with Philip was a challenge Linda had anticipated but dreaded. Their collaboration was tense, each meeting a clash of wills disguised under the veneer of professionalism. Philip's dismissive comments and condescending smiles were small daggers aimed at her confidence. But Linda had grown accustomed to his provocations. Weeks passed, and the project continued to evolve under Linda's guidance. She allowed Philip to present himself as the lead, letting him take credit for ideas that were not entirely his own. It was a delicate balance, giving him enough control to appease his ego while retaining enough influence to steer the project in the right direction. But Philip was not content with merely sharing the spotlight. His plans to sabotage Linda's progress became increasingly obvious. Files went missing, emails were mysteriously deleted, and critical documents were altered without her consent. Each incident was subtle enough to be dismissed as human error, but Linda was certain of the malicious intent behind them. Rather than confront Philip directly, Linda decided to document everything. She kept meticulous records, saving emails to secure drives and backing up her work in ways that only she could access. Her strategy was not only about survival but about building an undeniable case against those who sought her downfall. The final straw came during a high-profile presentation meant to update the board on the Greenfields project's progress. Linda had prepared diligently, her presentation designed to showcase their progress and highlight the project's potential for massive returns. But when she connected her laptop to the projector, the file she had spent weeks perfecting was inexplicably corrupted. Philip's smirk from across the table was all the confirmation she needed. He had engineered her failure, banking on her being too flustered to recover. But Linda was not one to be caught off guard. She had anticipated the possibility of sabotage and had created multiple copies of her presentation, stored on separate devices. "It seems there's been a technical issue," Linda said, her voice calm and steady. "Fortunately, I always prepare for the unexpected." With that, she connected her backup device and launched her presentation without further delay. Her composure was unshakable, her delivery precise and confident. The board members nodded in approval as she guided them through her findings. Philip's plan had backfired spectacularly, and his frustration was evident in the tightness of his jaw and the clenched fist resting on the table. After the meeting, Mr. Okafor called her into his office. "You handled that well," he said, his eyes studying her with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "But you do realize this battle you're fighting is not just about competence. It's about influence." "I understand," Linda replied. "But influence without competence is a house built on sand. It will crumble." Mr. Okafor's smile was almost imperceptible. "True. But even the most solid foundation can be undermined if enough people are determined to tear it down. Be careful, Linda. And be smart." She left his office feeling both vindicated and exhausted. The conspiracy against her was real, but so was her determination. If Philip and his allies wanted a war, she would give them one. But it would be on her terms, not theirs. Linda spent the next few weeks fortifying her position. She built alliances with those who valued competence over politics, quietly proving her worth through her work. Her network grew, not from charm or manipulation, but from trust earned through reliability. Yet even as her influence expanded, the shadow of sabotage loomed ever closer. Linda knew that her enemies were plotting something far more dangerous than mere inconveniences. But she was ready. Because the only way to win a war was to anticipate every move before it happened. Linda's victories, however small, were beginning to tip the scales. The Greenfield project was progressing at a pace even Mr. Okafor had not anticipated. And yet, the atmosphere at Empirical Holdings remained charged with unspoken tensions and quiet hostilities. Linda had learned to navigate the undercurrents of sabotage, but she also knew that Philip was growing increasingly desperate. What she did not expect was for Philip to escalate his tactics so brazenly. One morning, as Linda prepared to enter her office, she found her door already open. Her desk drawers had been rifled through, papers scattered across the floor. Whoever had searched her office had been thorough but not careful. It was an intimidation tactic as much as it was a violation of her personal space. Her first instinct was to report the incident to Mr. Okafor, but something held her back. If Philip was willing to stoop to this level, then confronting him directly might only escalate things further. Instead, Linda decided to double down on her preparations. She increased the security of her files, encrypting everything she worked on and maintaining digital backups in multiple locations. But she also began to play a more subtle game. While continuing to deliver outstanding work on the Greenfield project, Linda expanded her influence within the company. She started collaborating with other departments, lending her expertise to smaller projects that required her keen eye for detail. Her dedication and reliability earned her new allies, many of whom had grown disillusioned with the toxic politics that had taken root at Empirical Holdings. Linda's reputation was growing, but so was Philip's desperation. He began to isolate himself from his colleagues, spending long hours in his office, poring over documents and making hushed phone calls. The once confident and charming man was now visibly unraveling, his paranoia and resentment transforming him into a shadow of his former self. It was during this period of mounting tension that Linda received an unexpected visit from Adeobi, the company's chief operating officer. Adeobi was known for her meticulousness and her ability to see through deceit. Her reputation as a corporate titan was matched only by her ability to cultivate genuine loyalty among those who worked with her. "I've been hearing interesting things about you, Linda," Adeobi said as she settled into one of the chairs across from Linda's desk. Her tone was measured, but there was a warmth to her presence that put Linda at ease. "I hope they're good things," Linda replied, maintaining her composure despite the surprise visit. "Mostly," Adeobi smiled. "You've proven yourself to be remarkably resilient, and not just in the boardroom. It takes more than talent to survive in this place. It takes strategy." Linda nodded, her curiosity piqued. "I've learned that the hard way." "Good," Adeobi said. "Because what I'm about to tell you stays between us." Her voice lowered, and her gaze sharpened. "Philip is planning something. Something that could jeopardize not only your career but the Greenfields project itself. He's already lost credibility with many of his colleagues, but he's banking on something big to turn the tide." Linda's stomach tightened. "Do you know what he's planning?" "Not exactly. But I have sources who are loyal to the company's success above individual ambition. They've overheard him discussing ways to discredit you. Fabricating evidence of misconduct, perhaps even blaming you for financial discrepancies within the project." Adeobi's expression was grave. "You need to be prepared." "I thought I was," Linda admitted. "But if he's willing to go that far, then I need to be even more vigilant." "Indeed. But I didn't come here just to warn you," Adeobi said. "I came to offer you my support. I've watched you navigate this place with integrity, something that is rare around here. If you need resources, if you need allies, consider me one of them." Linda felt a surge of relief mingled with caution. "Thank you. That means more than you know. Just make sure you're ready when the time comes," Adeobi said as she rose to leave. "Because whatever Philip is planning, he's not going to give you a fair fight." As the days passed, Linda took Adeobi's advice to heart. She continued her work with an even greater intensity, knowing that the final confrontation was drawing near. She monitored every transaction, reviewed every document, and maintained a meticulous log of her interactions with Philip and his allies. Yet, even with all her precautions, Linda knew that the only way to truly defeat Philip was not just to defend herself, but to expose him. She began to investigate his dealings within the company, subtly gathering evidence of his unethical practices. What she discovered was far worse than she had imagined. Philip's manipulation extended beyond mere office politics. He had been embezzling company funds, using his influence to cover his tracks while discrediting anyone who dared to question him. The deeper Linda dug, the more damning the evidence became. She prepared her findings with meticulous care, knowing that once she revealed the truth, there would be no turning back. And as the day of reckoning approached, Linda steeled herself for the battle ahead. The day of reckoning had arrived, and Linda felt the weight of it pressing heavily on her shoulders. Her meticulous preparations had all been leading to this moment, but even with all the evidence she had gathered, she couldn't entirely dismiss the unease twisting in her stomach. This wasn't just a battle for her own career, it was about the integrity of Empirical Holdings, the company she had poured her energy and passion into. Her meeting with Mr. Okafor was scheduled for the afternoon. She had requested the meeting under the guise of a critical update on the Greenfields project, knowing full well that the board members would be present to hear her findings. The evidence she had collected against Philip was damning. It painted a clear picture of his manipulation, deceit, and embezzlement, and Linda had left no stone unturned in making sure her case was airtight. As the meeting approached, Linda prepared herself mentally, reviewing her notes and rehearsing her presentation. She had learned that Philip was attempting to make one last power move, an attempt to shift the blame for his financial discrepancies onto her. His ploy involved fabricated documents and falsified reports, all designed to cast doubt on her integrity and competence. The boardroom was filled with the company's most influential figures when Linda walked in. Mr. Okafor sat at the head of the table, his calm and composed demeanor masking any hint of bias. Philip was already there, his posture rigid and his expression locked into a mask of false confidence. Adeabi was also present, her eyes steady and watchful. "Good afternoon, everyone," Linda began, her voice clear and unwavering despite the nerves churning within her. "I appreciate you all taking the time to meet with me today. I have important updates regarding the Greenfield project, but first, I must address a matter of great concern." She clicked her remote, bringing up a presentation on the screen. It started with the progress of the Greenfield project, how far it had come, the milestones achieved, the efficiencies introduced. The board members nodded with approval, but Linda could see Philip's irritation growing. "And now, I must address an issue that, if left unchecked, could seriously damage this company's reputation and financial stability," Linda continued. "Over the past few months, I have gathered evidence of unethical practices conducted by a senior member of this company. These practices include embezzlement, manipulation of reports, and attempts to sabotage the work of others to cover one's own wrongdoing." She could feel the shift in the room's energy as she began to lay out the evidence, document by document, transaction by transaction. The intensity of her delivery held the board members' attention captive. Mr. Okafor's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes were sharply focused on every piece of evidence Linda presented. When she finally reached the part of her presentation that tied all the pieces together, she paused, her gaze settling on Philip. His face had turned an unhealthy shade of red, his hands clenched so tightly on the table that his knuckles had gone white. "Philip has not only tried to undermine my work but has actively stolen from this company," Linda stated. "His actions are a betrayal of the trust placed in him by Empirical Holdings and a violation of the ethical standards we all claim to uphold." Philip exploded. "This is a ridiculous fabrication. A desperate attempt to save your own neck because you know you're about to be exposed for the fraud you are." "I anticipated you might say that," Linda replied calmly. "Which is why I took the liberty of cross-referencing all financial records, communication logs, and project reports. Everything has been verified by independent auditors." She handed out printed copies of the audit findings, which bore the signatures of credible external auditors. The board members pored over the documents, their murmurs of disapproval growing louder. Mr. Okafor finally spoke. "Philip, do you have anything substantial to counter these findings?" Philip's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked around the room, searching for allies, but found only cold, disapproving stares. "The evidence speaks for itself," Mr. Okafor concluded. "Philip, you are hereby suspended pending further investigation. Linda, your dedication and transparency have not gone unnoticed. We will discuss the future of your role within the company at a later date. For now, I want you to continue leading the Greenfield project to its successful completion." The meeting ended, but the aftermath of Linda's revelations continued to ripple through Empirical Holdings. Philip's fall from grace was swift and irreversible. In the days that followed, investigations confirmed all of Linda's findings, and Philip was terminated from the company with legal action pending. Adeabi visited Linda in her office a week later, her smile genuine and approving. "You did well, Linda. I knew you had it in you." "Thank you, Adeabi. I couldn't have done it without your support." "That's the thing about integrity," Adeabi replied. "It attracts the right kind of allies." Linda's journey was far from over, but she had emerged victorious from the battle she had been forced to fight. The lessons she had learned would guide her forward, not just as a professional but as a person determined to maintain her values no matter the cost. As she returned to her work, Linda realized that true power lay not in titles or authority, but in resilience, integrity, and the courage to stand for what was right. Thank you for watching. Did the story remind you of anyone? Please hit the subscribe button, share this story with someone, like the video and tell me about your thoughts in the comment section.